Hi guys and welcome to Crazy Pepper Revenge. This channel is all about crazy true stories, stuff that happens in real life when things get a little bit messy, people dealing with drama, cheating, lies, breakups, and even revenge. Some stories are wild, some are emotional, but all of them will keep you watching. If you like real talk and real situations, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stick around. This is Crazy Pepper Revenge, where the stories get spicy.
Yes, Miss Chen. I'm ready to lead the real reboot.
Last week, my father-in-law, Richard Turner, passed after a brutal 6-month fight with cancer. He founded Turner Enterprises, a massive manufacturing company worth several $billions. At his funeral at St. Michael's Cathedral, I stood in the back pretending to mourn while everyone else put on the performance of a lifetime. The whole thing felt like a corporate-sponsored Greek tragedy. My wife Jessica stood up front in a designer black dress that looked more red carpet than funeral, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief that probably cost more than most people's rent. The board members watched her like vultures circling fresh meat. I could see the dollar signs in their eyes. To everyone there, I was just the useless son-in-law who married into money. The guy with no real job who showed up sometimes to play on his computer. I'd overheard that exact phrase at least a dozen times over 3 years, usually from board members who couldn't balance their own checkbooks. But Richard had been different. He'd been my mentor and friend. We'd spent years in his study, laughing at the board's incompetence over expensive scotch. He taught me the real business, not the sanitized MBA version. Late nights with factory managers, learning how things actually worked, understanding that knowing every employee's name mattered more than knowing stock prices. The funeral was packed with people who'd never liked Richard but loved his money. Chairman David Sterling kept adjusting his tie and exchanging meaningful glances with the other board members. Kyle Harrison, whose personality could best be described as wet cardboard, was practically salivating. He was probably already mentally redecorating Richard's corner office. Margaret Foster, the CFO who actually knew what she was doing, looked uncomfortable, and Tom Williams was definitely asleep in the third row. Behind me, someone from HR whispered, "I heard he doesn't even have a real position at the company." I recognized the voice. She'd once asked me if I was Jessica's personal assistant at a Christmas party. I told her I was more of a professional disappointment, which she found hilarious until she realized I wasn't joking. 3 weeks before he died, Richard had called me into his study. He was thin from chemo, but sharp as ever. "I'm dying," he said casually, like commenting on the weather. "Doctors give me a month, maybe 2. I'll be damned if I let those parasites tear apart everything I built." He poured us whiskey and slid a folder across his desk. Inside were share transfer documents. He was giving me 71% controlling interest in Turner Enterprises. We signed them that day with his attorney, my lawyer Sarah Rodriguez, and a notary named Barbara, who ran a small office in the suburbs and had no idea she was witnessing corporate nuclear war. "Never tell Jessica," he warned me. "She'll turn it into a social media caption. CEO Life chose me with 20 hashtags. We both laughed. "She's my daughter and I love her, but Lucas, she doesn't understand what it takes to run a company. She understands optics and branding, and she thinks business is a photo shoot." He wasn't wrong. Jessica had already started a Pinterest board called CEO Aesthetic before Richard was even buried. I'd seen it one night when she left her laptop open. Pages of power suits, minimalist office designs, and motivational quotes. "The future is female," next to "disrupt or die," next to "boss babe energy." It was every corporate cliche thrown in a blender. The funeral wrapped up and everyone moved to the Montgomery estate for the reception. Rich people eating expensive cheese and pretending to be sad. I straightened my tie and whispered to myself, "Rest easy, Richard. This circus is about to get interesting." A week later, Jessica strutted into her new office, Richard's old office. She threw a party that night to celebrate her appointment. The penthouse ballroom had been transformed into nouveau riche desperation. There were ice sculptures of the company logo melting under hot lights, an actual champagne fountain, like it was 1990, and a string quartet that nobody listened to. The board members gathered around Jessica, toasting bold leadership and a new era. David Sterling was holding court by the bar, explaining how he'd always known Jessica had the vision to lead. This was the same guy who told Richard 6 months ago that women were too emotional for executive positions. Apparently, death and dollar signs changed perspectives. I was standing near a melting ice sculpture when Kyle materialized next to me holding a martini. "Hell of a night, isn't it?" he said too loudly, gin on his breath. "Elena really knocked it out of the park." "Very her," I said, watching a waiter try to mop up champagne spillage. He patted my back with patronizing sympathy. "Tough luck, huh? From CEO's son-in-law to whatever it is you do here." He laughed at his own joke. Several other board members nearby pretended not to eavesdrop while absolutely eavesdropping. "Breathing and collecting dividends," I said casually. "It's exhausting. Sometimes I have to sit down." He laughed harder, not realizing he'd just congratulated his future boss. Behind him, David watched our interaction intently, probably trying to gauge whether I'd cause problems. The thing about being underestimated is it's like having a superpower nobody knows about. While Kyle was composing his story about poor Lucas for the next board meeting, I was calculating exactly how long it would take to dismantle his career. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Friday morning arrived like a freight train nobody ordered. At 9:30 a.m., I got an email from David's assistant. "Your presence is requested in conference room A, the big intimidation chamber with floor-to-ceiling windows and a table you could land aircraft on." 6 board members sat around that massive table. David at the head, naturally. Kyle to his right, wearing a smile he'd practiced in the mirror. Tom, half asleep. 3 others whose names I couldn't remember. One guy with a comb-over was frantically taking notes on an iPad, even though nobody had said anything yet. "Lucas," David began dramatically, "thank you for joining us. I'm sure you're wondering why we've called you here." I wasn't wondering. I'd known since Tuesday when I overheard Kyle on the phone talking about clearing out dead weight and optimizing personnel allocation. But I nodded anyway. "We've been reviewing our organizational structure," David continued, reading from a prepared statement. "In light of recent leadership changes, we've decided to make adjustments to better align our resources with strategic objectives. Corporate speak. Beautiful, meaningless buzzwords strung together into technically sentences." Kyle couldn't contain himself. "What David is trying to say is we've decided to terminate your position effective immediately." The room went quiet except for comb-over guy's stylus scratching. Margaret stared at her hands. Tom had actually woken up. "Just like that?" I asked, keeping my voice curious. "Yes," David said with satisfaction. "We believe this is in the company's best interest. You'll receive 2 months severance and a positive reference." I smiled, and confusion crept into their expressions. "Perfect. I was worried you'd make it awkward." Kyle's smile flickered. "Awkward?" "Yeah, like you'd want an emotional conversation. Or I'd have to sit through HR exit interviews. This is much cleaner. I appreciate the efficiency." They'd expected begging, panic, maybe tears. The whole firing ritual depended on the sufferer playing their role correctly. Instead, I was acting like they'd told me I won the lottery. "You're taking this well," David managed. "Why wouldn't I said, gathering my things. "It's just business, right? Nothing personal. Companies evolve. People move on. Circle of corporate life." I walked to the door and turned back. "Gentlemen, it's been educational. I've learned so much about corporate governance and the creative limits of expense account fraud." Margaret actually choked on air at that. Back home, I opened the safe hidden behind a terrible abstract painting Jessica had bought for $5,000. Inside was the document that would turn Turner Enterprises upside down. The share transfer agreement, notarized and legal, giving me 71% controlling interest. I texted Sarah Rodriguez a photo. "They fired me today. How's our position?" Her response came in 30 seconds. "Legally ironclad. I've had 3 firms review it. Sit tight and let them dig their own graves. Also, congrats on the termination. That's actually hilarious timing." So I sat tight. The board popped champagne, reshuffled positions, and spread rumors that I was emotionally unstable. By Monday afternoon, the rumors had evolved. According to the break room gossip chain, I'd apparently had a screaming match with Jessica, didn't happen, thrown a laptop at Kyle, tempting but no, been caught day drinking, the coffee wasn't that bad, and was possibly joining a competitor out of spite. My favorite was that I'd been having an affair with someone from HR. The woman was married with 3 kids and spent lunch breaks doing CrossFit. Not exactly affair material, and I wasn't a complete dirtbag. Jessica called once on Thursday evening. "People are talking," she said without preamble. "They're saying you're unstable. Lucas, you're making me look bad." I almost laughed. "Elena, I got fired from a job that barely existed. If that makes you look bad, maybe the problem isn't me." She hung up without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, Sarah kept me updated. Saturday afternoon. Board meeting minutes just leaked to me. They're planning to sell 2 subsidiaries, Anderson Manufacturing and that AI startup you acquired. They're calling it strategic divestment to maximize shareholder value. I was grilling steaks on my balcony when that message came through. I actually laughed hard enough that my neighbor Josh looked over with concern. You good, man? Never better, I replied, raising my beer. Just watching some people make really bad decisions from a safe distance. Anderson Manufacturing was named after the grandfather of Victoria Chen, who owned 18% of Turner Enterprises. Selling it for cheap was basically spitting in her face. The AI company, NeuralSync, was actually profitable in developing genuinely interesting manufacturing automation. It was like watching someone sell classic car parts for scrap metal prices. I texted Sarah back, "Perfect. Let them hang themselves." Which subsidiaries? Anderson Manufacturing and NeuralSync. You know, the ones that are actually profitable. They're selling the good stuff to juice quarterly numbers. It was so predictable it hurt. Short-sighted executives sacrificing long-term stability for short-term gains that would make their stock options look good before they jumped ship to another company. Sunday was even better. I slept until 10, made waffles from scratch, and spent the afternoon reading financial reports Sarah sent over. The board's plans were laid out in excruciating detail, all in corporate language that made "we're screwing everyone for personal profit" sound like innovative restructuring initiatives. They were selling Anderson Manufacturing to a private equity firm for substantially less than it was worth, probably because someone had a connection and expected a kickback. NeuralSync was being shopped to competitors. It was corporate self-destruction. Sunday night around 9, my phone rang. Kyle Harrison. I stared at his name for 10 seconds, debating whether this would be entertaining enough. Curiosity won. "Kyle," I answered, putting him on speaker so I could continue reading. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "Lucas, hey buddy." His voice had forced cheerfulness. Either drunk or about to ask for something. "How's the weekend treating you? Getting some rest after everything?" "Just processing my emotions, contemplating life choices," I said casually, flipping pages. The usual post-termination activities. Also made waffles. They were excellent. Pause. He was trying to figure out if I was being sarcastic. I was. I was always being sarcastic. "That's great, man. Really great. Listen, tough week, huh? The whole termination thing must have been rough." I could hear the fake sympathy, the vocal equivalent of "bless your heart." "Devastating," I replied deadpan. "I've been crying into my premium whiskey and expensive steaks all weekend. It's been very difficult." "Right, well, I just wanted you to know, totally off the record, friend to friend, if you're ever looking for a job, I know a guy at a small firm downtown. They're always looking for talented people. I could put in a good word, help you land on your feet." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Kyle was offering me a job like he was throwing a life preserver to a drowning man. The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "That's kind," I said, meaning it to sound sincere, but definitely coming out amused. "Does he need someone to buy him out by Monday?" Silence, complete, beautiful silence. "I'm sorry, what?" "The firm," I clarified, thoroughly enjoying myself. "Is he looking for an acquisition? Because I've got some capital freed up and I'm always interested in investment opportunities." More silence. I could hear gears grinding in Kyle's head. "I think you misunderstood," he finally managed. "I meant like an analyst position, entry-level stuff, to get you back in the game." "Oh, I understood perfectly," I said, still smiling. "I just thought if we're talking about downtown firms, we might as well think big. But hey, if he needs an analyst, tell him to send me his info. I'm always happy to review opportunities." He didn't get the joke. Kyle had never gotten a joke in his life unless it was explained in PowerPoint format with supporting documentation. Monday morning, I put on my best Navy suit. Jessica once said it made me look like a well-paid accountant, which I'd taken as an insult, but now realized was perfect. Accountants were underestimated, overlooked. The kind of people who quietly kept track of where all the bodies were buried. I paired it with a white shirt, a burgundy tie Richard had given me 2 Christmases ago, and cufflinks that had belonged to his father. I wanted him there with me in spirit when I walked into that boardroom and burned everything down. Security stopped me at the building. Dave, my buddy from the front desk, wasn't there. Instead, it was Marcus, the weekend guy who looked like he'd played linebacker and took his intimidation job very seriously. "Sir, you'll need an escort." The escort was Janet from HR, who'd processed my termination paperwork with the emotional investment of someone filing a TPS report. She looked like she'd rather be on fire as she led me to the elevator. We rode up in silence, her clutching her tablet like a shield, me humming the theme from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Because if you're going to have a showdown, you need the right soundtrack. This is highly irregular, Janet finally said as we approached the 32nd floor. Janet, I appreciate that, I said sincerely. I know this isn't in your job description. For what it's worth, you've always been professional. She glanced at me surprised. Are you about to do something crazy? Define crazy, I said as the elevator opened. From where I'm standing, what's crazy is a board selling off profitable subsidiaries to pad their portfolios. I'm just here to have a conversation. I walked into the boardroom and every face froze. Kyle, mid-sip, nearly choked on his coffee, sputtering everywhere. David's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and the dawning understanding that something had gone very wrong with his Monday plans. Morning, gentlemen, I said cheerfully, setting my briefcase down with a solid thunk. And Margaret, of course. Beautiful morning, isn't it? I saw a cardinal on my way in. They say that's good luck. David squinted at me like I was a mirage. You don't work here anymore. True, I replied, pulling out a chair directly across from him. Very true, David. You fired me on Friday, I remember it clearly. Very dramatic, though Gerald falling asleep halfway through undercut the gravitas. Tom, who had been dozing, jerked awake. What? I wasn't... But here's the thing, I continued, opening my briefcase with casual confidence. While I don't work here anymore, I own here. And that makes meetings complicated. I dropped the folder on the table, right in the center where everyone could see it. Transfer of controlling interest, Turner Enterprises, Inc. Kyle reached for it first, hands shaking. I watched his face journey through confidence, concern, horror, and complete devastation. This can't be real, he whispered, but his voice cracked. You expect us to believe, he started, voice climbing in pitch, that Richard Turner would hand over controlling interest to you? To his son-in-law who doesn't even have a real job? To someone who couldn't even hold down a basic analyst position? First, I said, holding up one finger, you fired me, so the couldn't hold down narrative is revisionist. Second, believe whatever helps you sleep. I don't need faith. I have documents, notarized, witnessed, reviewed by multiple legal teams, and filed with the SEC. Legal documents don't care about your feelings. David found his voice, strangled. This could destabilize the entire company. Our shareholders, our investors, market confidence. No, gentlemen, I interrupted, unable to keep the grin off my face. You already did that. You've been doing it for years. I'm here to fix it. Margaret actually snorted, quickly covering it with a cough when David shot her a death glare. I made a mental note to keep Margaret around. My phone buzzed loudly on the table. Perfect timing. I glanced at the screen. Anderson Holdings. The universe had a sense of humor. I answered and put it on speaker, setting the phone in the middle of the table. Lucas Ward speaking. Mr. Ward, this is Victoria Chen from Chen Holdings. Her voice came through crystal clear, all business and sharp edges. Victoria was a legend in investment. She'd made her first billion by age 35. Richard had respected the hell out of her. I'm calling regarding the news about Turner Enterprises' ownership structure. We need to schedule a meeting, today, if possible. I could see David's face losing color, draining from angry red to pale gray. Of course, Ms. Chen, I said professionally, making sure everyone heard every word. I'm actually in a board meeting right now discussing the transition. How does 2 o'clock work? I can meet at your offices or we can do a video call. 2 o'clock is perfect. My offices. And Mr. Ward, bring your attorney and your CFO. We have a lot to discuss regarding the current board's recent decisions. Absolutely. I'll have Sarah Rodriguez with me, my attorney. And I'll bring Margaret Foster as well, assuming she's willing to step into the CFO role officially. I glanced at Margaret, who looked like someone told her she'd won the lottery and been drafted simultaneously. Excellent, Victoria said. I look forward to working with leadership that actually understands fiduciary responsibility. The line went dead. That last comment hung in the air like a grenade with its pin pulled. The silence was deafening. Did she just... One of the nameless board members started. Imply you've been failing your legal obligations to shareholders? I finished. Yeah, she did. Victoria's not known for subtlety. Kyle looked like someone told him Santa wasn't real. The Easter Bunny was a lie. and his childhood dog went to a farm where they made hot dogs. His worldview was crumbling in real time. "This is insane," he whispered. No fight left in his voice. "You can't just walk in here and take over the company." "That I legally own 71% of," I suggested. "I think you'll find I can. It's what majority shareholders do, right between attend meetings and fire incompetent board members." Tom suddenly piped up from his corner. "I think I'm going to retire. My wife's been wanting to travel. This seems like a good time." "Tom, you can't just—" David started. "I absolutely can," Tom interrupted, standing with more energy than I'd seen in 3 years. "I'm 72, I've got more money than I can spend, and I don't need this stress. Lucas, it's been interesting. Good luck. Victoria Chen doesn't suffer fools, so clean house before that meeting." He nodded respectfully and walked out, leaving his portfolio and coffee mug behind. The remaining board members looked at each other, reality sinking in. They'd fired the majority shareholder, sold off valuable assets without his approval, and now the company's largest external investor wanted to discuss their recent decisions, which was corporate speak for "explain why you're all idiots before we pull our money." "Gentlemen," I said, standing and buttoning my jacket, "I think we all need to take a breath and reconvene. I have a meeting at 2, which gives us 4 hours to figure out how we're going to explain to Victoria Chen why you were trying to sell Anderson Manufacturing, which is named after her grandfather, to a private equity firm for 30% below market value. Margaret, can you pull together all financial data on that proposed sale? I want every number." Margaret nodded, already pulling out her laptop. "I'll have it ready within the hour. For what it's worth, I voted against that sale. It's in the minutes." "I know," I said, giving her a genuine smile. "I read them. That's why you still have a job." Kyle finally found his voice, weak and defeated. "You're really going to do this? Just take over?" "Kyle," I said, pausing at the door. "I already did." At 2 o'clock sharp, I walked into Victoria Chen's offices on the 47th floor of Willis Tower, flanked by Sarah Rodriguez in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than a car, and Margaret, who looked like she'd mainlined an entire pot of coffee. Victoria's office was what you'd expect from someone who made billions. Floor-to-ceiling windows with views that made you feel like you were floating, furniture that was minimalist and obscenely expensive, and 0 personal touches. One black and white photograph sat on her desk of an older man, her grandfather, who'd founded Anderson Manufacturing. Victoria stood by the window, silhouetted against the skyline. She turned as we entered. "Mr. Ward," she said, extending her hand with a firm grip. "Miss Rodriguez, Miss Foster, please sit." We settled into leather chairs around a glass table, so clean I could see my reflection. "We don't support chaos," Victoria said bluntly, getting straight to the point. "Chen Holdings has 18% of Turner Enterprises, making us your largest external investor. When Richard was alive, we had confidence. When Jessica took over, we had concerns. Now you're telling me you've been the majority shareholder this entire time. I need to understand what that means for our investment." "Good," I replied, matching her directness. "Because I only cause chaos when necessary, and right now it's very necessary. The board's been running Turner Enterprises like a personal ATM for years. They were about to sell your grandfather's company to a private equity vulture for pennies on the dollar." Victoria watched me carefully, assessing whether I was another corporate parasite or someone who actually cared. "Here's what I want to do," I said, pulling out Margaret's folder. "Cost freezes on all executive compensation until we stabilize. Full audit of every department to identify where we're hemorrhaging money and talent. Leadership cleanup. Anyone who can't justify their position gets voted out. And investor transparency. You get monthly reports on everything, not the sanitized BS David's been feeding you." Victoria took the folder and read through it with speed and focus. Minutes passed in silence, except for pages turning and the distant hum of the city below. My phone buzzed. Sarah's personal cell, which she only used for emergencies. I excused myself and checked the message. "They're trying to claim Richard was mentally unfit when he signed. David's hired some hotshot firm to challenge the share transfer, filing in court tomorrow morning." I almost laughed. Of course they were. Their response to losing wasn't accepting defeat gracefully, but burning everything down on their way out. I typed back, "Send them Richard's medical clearance from 3 weeks before he signed. And Sarah, include a Sudoku puzzle. Tell them Richard completed it the same day he signed the transfer. Expert level in under 8 minutes. For irony." Sarah's response, "You're my favorite client. I'm billing them for the puzzle. Victoria looked up, catching my smile. Good news? The opposite, I said. The board's trying to challenge the share transfer by claiming Richard wasn't mentally competent, filing in court tomorrow. I expected concern. Instead, Victoria smiled. Not the professional one, but something almost predatory. If your shares stand, we'll back you. Full support, 18% voting with your 17. If they overturn the transfer, we're pulling our entire investment within 90 days and shorting your stock on the way out. I want competent leadership, Mr. Ward. I don't care who provides it, but I won't watch my grandfather's legacy get pillaged by idiots. That's fair, I said. You'll have my answer tomorrow after the hearing. Tuesday morning, I arrived at Cook County Circuit Court. The courthouse smelled like stress and defeated dreams. David was there with his lawyer, Richard Webb, who looked exactly like Central Casting's expensive attorney. Silver temples, three-piece suit, air of superiority. Kyle was there looking like he hadn't slept. Margaret had positioned herself on our side of the aisle. Two other board members huddled in back, trying to distance themselves from the disaster. Judge Patricia Morrison entered. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and a no-nonsense bun, and reading glasses she looked over rather than through, giving her a perpetual expression of being unimpressed with everyone's BS. I liked her immediately. This is case number 2025 CV 47362, the bailiff announced. David Sterling and the board of directors of Turner Enterprises versus Lucas Ward regarding validity of share transfer agreements dated October 1st, 2020. Judge Morrison shuffled papers, glanced at both teams, and sighed like she'd already decided this was a waste of her morning. Mr. Webb, you're filing the challenge. Make it quick. Webb stood with theatrical flourish. Your Honor, we're here because a grave injustice occurred. Richard Turner was manipulated in his final days by his son-in-law into signing away controlling interest in a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Mr. Turner was undergoing intensive chemotherapy, was on significant pain medication, and wasn't in any condition to make sound business decisions. Sarah didn't wait to be called before standing. Your Honor, if I may, please do, Ms. Rodriguez. Save me some time. Everything Mr. Webb just said is demonstrably false and insulting to Mr. Turner's memory, Sarah said, her voice sharp. We have medical clearance from Mr. Turner's oncologist dated the same day as signing, confirming he was of sound mind and not under influence of medications that would impair judgment. We have testimony from the notary public who spoke with Mr. Turner at length and found him completely lucid. We have testimony from his personal attorney who confirmed Mr. Turner understood exactly what he was doing. And, she paused for dramatic effect, pulling out a paper with a flourish. We have a completed expert-level Sudoku puzzle. Mr. Turner finished the same day in under 8 minutes, with perfect accuracy. I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing at the expressions. Webb looked like someone told him his law degree was being recalled. David's face went through 7 different shades of red. Kyle just stared like it was written in ancient Sumerian. A Sudoku puzzle? Judge Morrison repeated, amusement in her voice, though her expression stayed neutral. Ms. Rodriguez, are you seriously submitting a Sudoku puzzle as evidence of mental competency? As supplementary evidence along with medical documentation, legal testimony, and notarized statements, yes. A man who can complete expert Sudoku in under 8 minutes clearly understands a share transfer agreement. If Mr. Webb would like to attempt the same puzzle under similar conditions to prove it's not indicative of mental acuity, I'm happy to provide one. Several people in the gallery laughed, including the court reporter who covered it with a cough. Judge Morrison's lips twitched. Webb adjusted his glasses, trying to recover. Your Honor, the timing is suspicious. Mr. Turner dies and suddenly his son-in-law owns 71%? This has all the hallmarks of undue influence. The timing is suspicious because Mr. Turner knew he was dying and wanted to protect his company from exactly what's happening now, Sarah countered. He watched his board run Turner Enterprises like a piggy bank for years. He made a calculated decision to transfer controlling interest to someone he trusted. That's not manipulation. That's good business sense and foresight. Judge Morrison held up her hand, silencing both attorneys. I've reviewed the documentation. The medical clearance is clear. The witnesses are credible. The notarization is proper. Mr. Webb, unless you have actual evidence of coercion or mental incompetence beyond speculation and convenient timing, this transfer stands. She banged her gavel. Motion denied. The share transfer is legally valid and binding. By 11 a.m. Tuesday, I reconvened the board in the same conference room where they'd fired me exactly 4 days earlier. Except this time, I sat at the head of the table, in Richard's old seat, watching every board member file in looking like they were attending their own funeral. "Kyle," I said conversationally, "your resignation is effective immediately. Don't forget your mug." I gestured to the world's best executive mug sitting in front of his seat, the one he'd bought himself because apparently nobody else would give him that award. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish out of water. Finally, he just stood, grabbed his mug, and walked out. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than if he'd slammed it. Silence filled the room like honey, thick and satisfying. "Okay," I said, pulling out Margaret's folder. "Let's talk about fixing this mess. First, the Anderson manufacturing sale is canceled effective immediately. Margaret, draft a letter to the PE firm. Keep it professional, but make it clear we're not interested now or ever. Second, the Neural Sync sale is also canceled. That company's actually innovative. Third, we're conducting a full operational audit of every department. Margaret's leading it with my full authority to fire anyone who can't justify their position or budget. That'll take months," one of the nameless board members protested weakly. "Then we better get started," I replied cheerfully. "And all executive bonuses are frozen until we stabilize operations. I know that's tough, but I'm sure you'll survive on your 6-figure base salaries. Try cutting back on golf club memberships if money gets tight." By afternoon, the story hit financial news like wildfire. "Fired executive revealed as 71% owner of Turner Enterprises" was the Bloomberg headline. Wall Street Journal went with "Corporate Coup, How Richard Turner's Son-in-Law Took Control from Beyond the Grave." CNBC brought me on for a remote interview at 3 o'clock. The anchor, Stephanie Lee, had a reputation for not suffering fools. "Mr. Ward, your critics say this was manipulation of a dying man. How do you respond?" "I'd say my critics should read the medical documentation and the court ruling before making accusations they can't back up," I replied from the temporary office they'd set up. Richard Turner was one of the smartest businessmen I ever knew. He made a calculated decision to protect the company he built. If people want to call that manipulation, they're welcome to their opinion. But the law disagrees. And firing board members on your first day as acknowledged majority shareholder. Technically my 5th day, but who's counting? Kyle Harrison was trying to sell profitable divisions for personal gain. That's not management, that's looting. I'm not here to play nice with people who treat Turner Enterprises like an 8. The interview went viral. By 5 o'clock, I had 3 voicemails from other outlets, 2 podcast interview requests, and an offer from a producer at 60 Minutes. Jessica called at 6:30 screaming, before I even got the phone to my ear, "You humiliated me. Everyone's talking about how I fired my own husband, who actually owned the company. Do you know what people are saying about me? Do you have any idea what this does to my reputation?" I waited for her to run out of steam. Took about 45 seconds. "Are you even listening?" "I heard every word," I said. "You're upset because you fired your husband without knowing he owned 71% of your family's company. You're embarrassed because it makes you look impulsive and uninformed," which is accurate. "But here's the thing. You humiliated yourself. You wanted to be CEO so badly you didn't do basic due diligence. You fired me without asking questions." Silence on the other end. Then she hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, I stood in Richard's office, my office now, with a glass of whiskey, watching the Chicago skyline at night. The city lights stretched toward the horizon like electric stars. This wasn't just revenge, though watching Kyle's face had felt pretty damn good. It was restoration. Richard had built Turner Enterprises from nothing, turned it into something that mattered, something that employed thousands of people and created real value. The board had been slowly cannibalizing it, and he'd trusted me to stop them. I raised my glass to the skyline, to Richard's memory, to whatever came next. The company was safe. The parasites were gone. Monday morning, we'd start rebuilding what they'd nearly destroyed. Best firing I ever got.